so much for being here tonight. There's a water for you that hasn't been drank out. It is all from the sun.
Thank you for that lovely introduction. My mom's gone. I can only think that my assistant, Tricia, who is my best friend, must have written it. It's far more than I deserve, but thank you for that generous introduction. And thank you all for the warm, very warm and kind welcome. A number of you said when we spoke at the front table that you all have been praying for us. And the general and his family and I want everyone to know that we feel those prayers. They are answered every day. We feel them. I have felt surrounded by angels since I took over this case. I've never had a moment of doubt or a moment of fear. Of course, I don't tend to the fear side anyway. Yeah, when I first wrote the book, the first thing anybody says who reads it is, do you have bodyguards? Do you have somebody starting your car for you? And so I just put it out there on Facebook. I said, I'm going to give you an answer that's part true, part facetious. Number one, God didn't give me a spirit of fear. Yeah. Number two, I'm Presbyterian and we have that whole predestination thing going. Number three, the horse is already out of the barn because the book's out there. And number four, I'm happy and healthy and I'm not going to be doing any skydiving. So if anything happens to me, check the names in the book. How many of you have ever heard me speak before other than the few minutes on TV? Have you heard me do speeches? If you have, then you know there's good news and bad news that comes with having me talk. The good news is I don't prepare a speech, and the bad news is I don't prepare a speech. So you never know what I'm going to say. My son leaned over and said, "Do you know what you're going to say?" I said, "No, I have absolutely no idea." So, whatever it is, it just comes out. As long as it's the truth, I figure it's a good way to go. So, taking on the Flynn case has been an extraordinary experience. I have seen some really bad corruption in our government before. That's why I felt compelled to write License to Lie. But this case takes the cake from every level. At first, I thought, it might just be the FBI, but then it became obvious that it was also the Department of Justice, and not just anyone in the Department of Justice, but the highest levels of the Department of Justice. And down the line, some also to Prosecutor Brandon Van Grack, who was pursuing the Flynn case and tried to get him to lie in the Eastern District of Virginia when I first came in the case. He was just adamant that General Flynn had admitted that he had knowingly made false statements on his firm's Foreign Agent Registration Act form. Nothing could have been further from the truth. And when we dug into it, we quickly found that not only was it not true, but Mr. Van Grack himself had edited out of the statement of offense any notion that General Flynn then and there knew that the statements were false, because he didn't, and he wouldn't have signed that. And then, of course, we've been finding information from the agents at the FBI and otherwise that they actually made up the alleged false statements. When the FBI goes to interview someone, they don't record it. The agents supposedly take their handwritten notes on things, but they don't do any sort of digital or or video recording of the interview, despite the fact that every one of them has at least 2 devices in their pocket that would provide a reliable, accurate recording of any interview. So they just don't do that. And why don't they do that? They don't do that because Mr. Mueller testified in front of Congress a number of years ago when he was director of the FBI that was just too burdensome for them. It would somehow it was harder than taking notes and going back and having to write up your 302 and then have that approved and everything. Well, the 302s, their forms that they write up as their reports of the interview, are just full of their own views or narratives or impressions of what was said. And in the Flynn case, they actually made up some of the things that they put in the 302, statements he did not say, and they left out things he did say, all of which would have been true if they had recorded them accurately, but of course they didn't. And then they used the 302 that had been through multiple iterations over a period of weeks until it was finally approved by Andrew McCabe himself to form the basis of the alleged false statement charges the special counsel brought. And we now have the handwritten notes of FBI agents, and we have other notes from inside the FBI of different meetings and things that show they schemed and planned how to interview General Flynn, to ambush him in the White House his second or third day there in such a way as to make sure he stayed relaxed and unguarded, and he didn't even know that he was the subject of an interview. They just sent a couple of agents over knowing he would talk to them. He worked with them for 30 years. One of the guys had been in the White House a couple of days before or the day before doing training for staff on different issues. So it was no big deal to him at all. And he also knew they had transcripts of his phone calls with Ambassador Kislyak, the Russian ambassador that everybody got so upset about him talking to. Never mind, it was his job to talk to the Russian ambassador, and he fortunately kept things from escalating into a serious conflict with Russia for the new administration to deal with, despite Obama's best efforts to create a serious problem. I heard today a recording of Mr. Obama saying something about how hard they worked for the peaceful transition of power. Yeah, and in fact, I was on Evening Edit as I was driving out here and talking about that very thing. And of course, we all know now that there was anything but a peaceful transition of power. There was an affirmative effort to do everything humanly possible to undermine and sabotage and blow up and destroy and impede the new administration. The Democrats in Congress in the last couple of hearings they've had have talked about reclaiming their time anytime they want the witness to stop talking and they want to start talking again. Well, I put out a tweet that said President Trump needs to reclaim his 4 years. And just imagine what he could do and could have done had he not been hamstrung, hogtied, and gagged. So we definitely have to do everything humanly possible and lawful, unlike the Democrats, to make sure he is elected again. And that means voting in person and taking everybody you know with you. I think it's a good idea to carpool to the polls, given the unrest that exists across the country. Take anybody that might have difficulty finding transportation with you to vote. Talk to everyone you can think of about these important issues, one of which is restoring the rule of law and some semblance of justice in this country. We have lost it. We all know there's a double standard. There's been a double standard for at least 20 years, according to my own experience that led to the publication of License to Lie. That has got to end. We cannot have one rule for Democrats and another one for Republicans and another one for certain politicians. It's just got to stop. And President Trump definitely wants to stop it. I know Attorney General Barr talks a lot about the rule of law. I, like you, I imagine, are pretty frustrated with the fact we haven't seen any results from the Durham investigation. I have no idea what's going on there or why it's taking so long or even why Kevin Kleinsmith wasn't indicted a year and a half ago. I can't begin to explain it, but I think if something doesn't happen pretty quick after the election, there are going to be a lot of changes. And from the I don't know how many of y'all heard about the declassification that Ratcliffe did. Yeah. And of course, more came today. And more will come tomorrow, because there's still a raft of information that they are hiding that shows that Hillary Clinton and her minions were behind all of the nefarious deeds that we have been dealing with for the last 4 years. Yeah. There are a lot of people that need to be locked up. Yeah, I don't know why we're not making more progress in that regard. We desperately need it so that people know this cannot happen again. And I know some people have struggled with, well, what crime is it? Well, I mean, there's a jillion federal statutes. Mr. Andrew Weissman, who's the lead villain in License to Lie, can make giving your mother a birthday present sound like a federal crime. So, I mean, it shouldn't be that hard to find statutes that apply. Just as a point of interest, it's not sedition or treason. Those statutes don't apply the way they're written now because they require being in a war or a crime of violence to attach to them, and we don't have that. So we probably, now that people have gotten a lot more sophisticated in how to undermine a government, need some modifications to those statutes, but there are any number of federal offenses that can be used to punish the conduct we've all witnessed, including false statements to Congress, false statements to courts, false statements to the FBI, and we've just got to get on with it. I think you all also expressed interest in having me talk about the Supreme Court vacancy. I don't know Judge Amy Coney Barrett personally, but I have been nothing but impressed with everything that I've read about her. I think she's an amazing young woman. She's got a stellar record and reputation, and just listening to her presentation in the Rose Garden that day made me tear up as if I were her mother. So we need to help and let our senators know we want her confirmed immediately, if not sooner. I actually suggested they not give the Democrats the benefit of a hearing. They don't have to. I think that's mainly because Lindsey Graham is of course, up for re-election and enjoys the theater. Of course, the other side of it is that the Democrats show their you-know-what so severely that it backfired against them on the Kavanaugh thing. So if they do the same thing this time, we might actually get more votes out of it. But I still think it would be good to kind of hit them upside the head with a 2x4 and let them know. Let them know that the Republicans can vote Amy Coney Barrett in without a hearing. There's absolutely no requirement for a hearing at all. In fact, hearings didn't start until Louis Brandeis was nominated for the court, and they had a hearing because he was Jewish. Yeah, so I said that is some precedent, and we damn sure don't have to follow that one. So all our senators need to know that we fully support her nomination, and they need to get on with it with as little to do as possible. Other current events. I'm happy to open it to questions if you all want to ask some questions. Judge Sullivan, whoa. Okay, here's the ultimate of all ironies, okay? Emmett Sullivan is the judicial hero of my book, Licensed to Lie. Yeah. I have bragged on him for 6 years all over the country, every time I've spoken about it, because he is the judge who held the government accountable for withholding evidence in the Ted Stevens case that would have exonerated Ted Stevens. And he was so upset about it, he even appointed a, quote, special prosecutor, end quote, to look into the Department of Justice and report his findings He wrote a 500-page report identifying systematic, pervasive, and intentional misconduct within the Department of Justice. Eric Holder, of course, promised to clean all that up. Boy, was that a farce. Yeah. The Obama administration deliberately weaponized and politicized every single federal agency. Even the EPA got a SWAT team under Obama. And they used it to pre-dawn raid Gibson Guitar Company for their wood, their imported special wood, and then wound up selling that wood to a supporter of Hillary Clinton. Yeah. John Fund and Hans von Spakovsky wrote a book called Obama's Enforcer about Eric Holder that is a good read, too, if you want to see some other instances of how bad Mr. Holder was and how corrupt the Obama administration was through the Department of Justice, or Injustice, I called it in one chapter in the book. Yeah, so Judge Sullivan is going to get a little torpedo by noon tomorrow. We are actually drafting and hope to file tonight a motion to recuse him from any further participation in the Flynn case. Now, the funny thing about a motion to recuse a federal judge is it goes to the judge who needs to recuse. Yeah. And the ethical rule, of course, says that he shall recuse when there's any appearance of bias. Well, obviously that hadn't happened. I mean, he should have and could have done it himself, and he hasn't. And of course, the DC Circuit Court of Appeals did not make him disqualify himself, nor did they disqualify him for us, despite the fact he actively litigated against General Flynn and us and the government by filing a petition for rehearing by the whole court after the panel of the court had ordered him to grant the motion to dismiss. So he became an active litigant in a case that he is now presiding over, and he became a litigant against General Flynn and the government. It's the first time in history that I know of that this has ever happened in the United States. Other countries have systems where the judge can be the prosecutor and the decision maker and everything else, but we've never worked that way until Judge Sullivan in this particular case. So that's one of the things we're pointing out in our motion to recuse. We had a lively hearing a couple of days ago, actually I think it's a week ago today, that lasted 5.5 hours. Most of that was Judge Sullivan talking and then his amicus, Mr. John Gleason, talking a lot of the left's version of conspiracy theories about how the president and the attorney general had done something here to shown some sort of corruption to dismiss the case against General Flynn. One of the things I learned in the process of all of this is that the Democrats and the leftists, whatever we're going to call them, are masters, absolute masters of deception, projection, and manipulation. If they're accusing you of it, they've already done it. So I think there'll be a little fun reading, and it'll probably make the news tomorrow night, the contents of our motion to recuse. Yes. Well, I mean, if somebody would just find Anthony Weiner's laptop, it had all the Hillary Clinton emails on it, 675,000 from the Clinton Foundation, her private email account, the State Department. It had even the BlackBerry backups that Comey had called the, quote, golden emails, end quote. And when the FBI went to get a search warrant on that laptop, they specifically excluded the golden emails because they didn't really want to find the truth. I'm pretty sure they already knew the truth. I'm pretty sure that since President Obama was emailing her on her secret server under an alias, he had to have approved her use of the secret server that was off the grid and unsecured, which means they had to have known about all the intrusions from foreign governments and the NSA database. They were mining it for their own political and financial benefit. I think one of the reasons that they have fought so hard to create this Russia collusion hoax and all the wrongful prosecutions is because they have so much to hide. And it goes far beyond what we know now. Will we ever find it? Somebody's got a copy of that laptop hard drive. And the laptop itself ought to be in the FBI vault at Quantico, if not at the main headquarters of the FBI. I mean, we need to get all of it. All of it needs to be uncovered. All the illegal payments through the Clinton Foundation, all the illegal payments to Biden and Burisma and from the Chinese, and that's what they're protecting. They're protecting billions, if not trillions of dollars in global wealth transfer to their own benefit and the benefit of their friends and families. Let me shift over here. Thoughts on Gina Haspel? Okay. Yeah, I've never trusted Gina Haspel. She was head of the London station for the CIA when all of this crap was going down with the Five Eyes group and the British over there at HGCQ or something. I never can keep their letters straight. But anyway, the British equivalent of the CIA and then their private group that's into intelligence stuff that also share commonality with Mr. Brennan and some other extremely connected folks in our government. So no, and apparently she's blocking the release of some crucial information, so I would have fired her a couple of weeks ago. Yes. Lady with the baby. Well, she actually answers only to the president, I think. Maybe to the ODNI, John Ratcliffe. She can't. Like I said, she should have been fired already. But, you know, I think certain people are advising the president not to fire anybody right before the election. They're worried about the Comey effect, which is completely inapposite to what we're dealing with now. Completely. In fact, I think he'd get more votes if he fired him right now. Let's see, somebody from this section. Yes, ma'am. Yes, everybody that cares and sees what's going on, I think, is disheartened right now. But we have barely started to fight. It's only really in the last couple of years that all of the evil and saboteurs and worms have really started to surface. Some things, they're far and wide. They are far and wide. Obama embedded deliberately tens of thousands of his people, communists, Marxists, whatever, into the various agencies in all kinds of positions. We need major civil service reform. We need to be able to fire people. We need to be able to fire people under the same premises you could fire anyone in the private sector. This notion that you can get a government job and stay there forever, first of all, isn't even healthy. I saw somebody come out of a government cubicle one time that looked like he hadn't seen the light of day in 30 years. Change produces growth whether you want it or not. So one of the things I think we need is at least a 15-year limit, with the exception of the military maybe, on drawing a government paycheck. And we need some kind of requirement that you have to leave Washington. I have never seen a more incestuous place in my entire life, and I only visit, I don't live there. But everybody that's there is also married to somebody who doesn't use the same name, and so you wind up with two people at assorted agencies working against the president that were all appointed by Obama or Clinton. And you often don't even know who they are, particularly if you're not really paying attention to that sort of thing. Like one of the things I noticed happened with the appointment of judges is that Mr. Trump, early on in his new administration, appointed Dabney Friedrich, a young woman lawyer, to the federal district court for the District of Columbia. Well, as soon as I saw her name on the list, I went bonkers, because Dabney Friedrich is the wife of Matthew Friedrich, who is one of the villains in License to Lie. Yeah, but nobody asked me. So, I know, how can that happen, right? Anyway, we've got to track connections better and realize that personnel really is policy, and we've got to make some personnel changes. People are just going to have to be fired. If they sue, let the Department of Justice Civil Division defend the lawsuits. There's actually an Obama judge, Amy Berman Jackson, in the D.C. Circuit, who recently gave Peter Strzok a very favorable ruling on his lawsuit against the FBI, and if he isn't prosecuted, he could wind up being reinstated in his job. Yeah. She's also the one that threw the book at Roger Stone and Paul Manafort and put him in solitary and all of that. Yeah, she's not on my list of good judges. Yes, ma'am. The question was, has KT McFarland been helpful to us? KT McFarland, I think, is a sweet person, but I can't say that she's been helpful to us. Yep. Way back in the back. Yes. I'm sorry, build up what? Put on my spy hat. Yeah. None of the other stations will have me on. And that's been true since the book came out in 2014. In fact, first they tried to kill it with silence, because when I published it, the named villains were White House counsel for President Obama, Deputy Director General Counsel of the FBI, Obama's counterterrorism advisor, and all the pictures with him in the Oval Office, the Assistant Attorney General for the Criminal Division of the Department of Justice, things like that. So Amazon Shadow Bandit, and nobody would have me on anything, not even Fox, until John Stossel, when Catherine Rumler was mentioned as being a possible, she was Obama's White House counsel. She's one of the main villains in the book. When she was named as a possible Attorney General nominee, John Stossel got on it and did a feature on it with a lot of good graphics and everything, and that she pulled her name from the nomination process for Attorney General. And then it started getting a little more attention, but it really wasn't until the Mueller probe and Andrew Weissman wound up being appointed by Mueller that people went, holy cow, she's been trying to tell us this since 2013. Yes. Yes, it would take Congress to change the laws applicable to civil service employees, I think. And there's a huge government employees union, which seems to me like an oxymoron. I mean, you shouldn't be able to have a union of public servants who are supposed to be serving the public. The whole concept is upside down. But right. Yes, well, because of all the aspersions and lies that have been cast about him, I think he's probably been over-diligent in staying out of anything related to the Department of Justice. So, remember, Kennedy had his brother as Attorney General. Obama had his wingman as Attorney General. But I don't think the President and Bill Barr hardly speak to each other simply because of all the crap that's made out of anything when they do. So it's really up to Bill Barr and John Durham to do what needs to be done according to the facts and the law. And if they can't find the facts, I don't know where they're not looking, because they're out there. Yes. The answer to that is George Soros DAs. George Soros Attorney Generals and George Soros DAs. One of the things we've got to start fighting on a local level is that kind of influence in our elections, and make sure we get district attorneys. And in Texas, of course, we elect judges. make sure we get law and order people, and not the kind that just want to throw the book at you, because sometimes the government brings false prosecutions. So you got to have somebody that's actually willing to look at the real facts to find the truth and apply the law to it correctly, not somebody with an ideology that's either, if they're charged, they've got to be guilty, because that's not true at all, or the book should be thrown at them automatically, or anything like that, or that they should just get off automatically. It takes some intellectual integrity to serve on a jury, which is very important. And I would encourage everybody to welcome jury service, because a single juror can stop an unjust criminal conviction, and to pay attention to what's going on, who the judges are, ask them. They usually have kind of a town hall thing with several of them that you can ask questions of. Different groups will do that, and ask them what their view is on giving the defense exculpatory evidence. Ask the DAs, how they view their Brady obligation to provide the defendant evidence that the government holds that shows he's innocent. And are they willing to step up and make the hard choice of dismissing a wrongful prosecution? Will they prosecute police officers who have really engaged in brutality? And will they defend police officers who are wrongly accused of brutality and have a right to defend themselves? In any fight, frankly, between a police officer and anyone else, the police officer needs to win, and he needs to be able to win. This business of people getting in police officers' faces and screaming and all that, who raised these people? Really. Yes, ma'am. The question is, if the case isn't dropped, what is the reason that I don't want General Flynn to get a pardon? Well, I asked the president not to pardon General Flynn because I think it is hugely important for the country as a whole to have a criminal justice system that works to exonerate innocent people. And that it work to exonerate anyone who is innocent, not just General Flynn. So we have to keep fighting for these to make the system work. Now, we're filing the brief tomorrow to recuse Judge Sullivan. Otherwise, the case is fully briefed before him. He had his hearing that he so desperately wanted on the government's motion to dismiss. It was a circus, if any of you listened to it. If you didn't listen and you want to read the transcript, it's available on my website at sidneypowell.com. You can download it free. And you can also see all the pleadings in the case, including the exhibits, which are really very interesting. I was stunned at how ignorant Judge Sullivan was on all the filings the defense had made in the case. It was as if though we did not exist and that none of the documents the government produced as exculpatory evidence in the last 3 months existed. That was nothing short of stunning, nor did he know the law on several key points. But we're going to point all that out to him tomorrow in our filing. And then it's just a matter of time until he decides what he's going to do on the issue of dismissing the case and whether he's going to do it with or without prejudice. Now, that's anybody's guess as far as I'm concerned. I wouldn't even begin to predict, but I have the plan, excuse me, I have a plan for whatever course he decides to take, and we will win. Gentleman in the, I'm sorry. Yes, that's been the million-dollar question. What made Judge Sullivan change so dramatically from the approach he took in the Stevens case to this case? As best I can decide, judging from a statement he made even at the hearing last week, it's because Eric asked him to dismiss the case against Senator Stevens. Bill Barr asked him to dismiss the case against General Michael Flynn. That's the only material difference between the two cases, because the government misconduct against General Flynn was 1,000,000 times worse than the government misconduct against Ted Stevens. And what General Flynn has been through for the last 4 years is simply torturous and appalling. Yes. Yeah, there's been a concerted effort to drag it out, to keep General Flynn from talking or serving in the administration. That's another reason why they don't want him exonerated by the courts. And it's the most political, bogus, hideous prosecution I have ever seen in my career. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I don't know for sure what Judge Sullivan's trying to hide, and I don't want to speculate on that. But I have heard from reliable sources that the Clintons only appointed people that they really had some serious dirt on that they could control, or were sure that they would do what they wanted them to do. And Sullivan was originally a Clinton appointee. Yes, over here. Yeah, the Wiener laptop. Yes. I'm not sure about those stats. I've heard that, but I cannot independently verify it. The question was, have I heard anything specifically that would make the officers puke who saw the material on the Wiener laptop? The answer to that is not exactly, but Mr. Wiener is a pervert under the best of circumstances, and I'm sure it involved children and had to have been really bad for the New York Police Department guys who were reviewing that material to be as sick and disgusted as they were. Over here. Yeah, they've forgotten that. The government's forgotten that they're supposed to work for you. Yes. What power do we have other than voting? Well, we can make a lot of noise. I think the walk-away movement has been doing a lot of good. I think the prayer service on the National Mall stunned a lot of people. I think if we can collectively join together to find more ways of getting the truth out, I mean, we really need some wealthy conservatives to step up and get a media outlet going that simply looks for the truth and puts out the truth and lets the chips fall where they fall. I mean, frankly, there are a lot of Republicans up there that need to go too. You know, we're supposed to have a citizen government, and I think most American citizens, the ones that call themselves America like you, that love America, take care of their kids and pay their bills and pay their taxes and generally work their butts off to do everything they're supposed to do to be good people. These are the people we need in government, Americans. Well, that's not true, but there are an awful lot of lawyers there, which is part of the problem. Yeah. Yes, sir? Would General Flynn be willing to accept the position as director of the FBI? Yeah. I don't think General Flynn would, but I have said that I would. I'm sorry, what was that question? Actually, the FBI works under the Attorney General. So if I took director of the FBI, I would be working under, but pretty much independent of the Attorney General. But the FBI is supposed to work for the Department of Justice, not the other way around. And it's not supposed to be going off on its own to exonerate Hillary Clinton or get a search warrant that doesn't cover all the emails on the laptop or wipe cell phones or anything like that. So there need to be a lot of changes at the FBI. In fact, when somebody mentioned to me on live TV the possibility of me being FBI director, apparently the White House put out some exclusive statement to One American News, and I just happened to be waiting in the wings when the reporter reported it. She didn't know I was there. The anchor didn't know that was going to be the news, so we were all laughing. But my response was, well, I think there might be a lot of people in D.C. and elsewhere that need some laundry service with that announcement. So if the nomination were actually made, I would encourage y'all to invest in Tide and Palmolive. And way back in the back. The question was, is General Flynn going to sue the people who brought false charges against him? That's one question I have to defer answering on, I'm sorry. Attorney-client privilege issues. Stay tuned. How can General Flynn be made whole? Well, there's nothing that can replace 4 years. We're grateful that he wasn't in prison for those 4 years because there are plenty of people across the country, often young people put in prison when they were young black men, that didn't commit any crime at all, and they're freed by the work of the Innocence Project in New York. So if you, yep. And I don't know if y'all are familiar with Michael Morton in Texas, but he spent 25 years in a Texas state prison accused of having murdered his wife. His 3-year-old son had to be adopted by other people and grew up thinking his father had murdered his mother. He had to fight for 7 years to get a DNA test, which should have been provided immediately upon its availability. And of course, when he got it, it showed what he had said all along, and that was he was completely innocent. Meanwhile, the other person that had actually done the murder, I think he murdered someone else. So it shows all the things that go wrong when there is a wrongful conviction. I mean, it's just so important that the right person is prosecuted, particularly, well, for any kind of violent crime, for any crime, but especially violent crimes, because if they get the wrong person, the person who did it's out there doing it more. And Michael Morton lost 25 years of his life and his son on a wrongful conviction, while the prosecutor who prosecuted him became a state court judge, having run on having convicted Michael Morton and had hidden the bloody bandana that had the relevant DNA on it, and had hidden the statement of his son that describes someone else entirely having committed the murder, and some other evidence. Michael Morton wrote a book called Getting Life, and it's a real tribute to him and the faith he developed in prison. I would encourage you all to read that one also. It's a very compelling story that everybody needs to understand, because that stuff happens or has happened with alarming frequency, particularly in state courts around the country, which are even worse than our current federal courts are. Yes, sir. The question is, what is my interpretation of who is going to decide the election? Yeah, preferably voters. My goal is to have more than 52% of the registered voters in every county we can possibly find vote for President Trump. Because if that happens, then all these hundreds of millions of mail-in ballots will have to be, they'll be void, because they'll add up to more than the number of registered voters, and they couldn't really count for squat. So we've got to get a high percentage of votes in each county to in-person votes for President Trump to help ward off some of this. We need people working in polls. In terms of who could actually decide it, it depends on how it shakes out and whether there's litigation that comes out like Bush versus Gore, which had to be decided by the Supreme Court, the famous hanging Chad case. Boy, was that a mess. Yeah. Or whether, like happened, I think, with Thomas Jefferson and maybe Andrew Jackson, it goes to the House of Representatives to decide. But my understanding is, and I probably shouldn't even say this because I do not know the correct answer to this. I am speculating here. But I think the legislators are bound, or supposed to be bound, by what happened in their states. So, but I have not researched that myself. Yeah, Donna Brazil. Yeah, we've got problems at Fox News, folks. They're going farther left by the minute. Yes. Yes. Well, that's why I think we need to get really busy supporting more conservative outlets and building them up. I do know that John Solomon started an organization called Just the News recently. And I know they're adding a streaming video component and maybe essentially, well, I guess it's not television, but things that look like television shows, because he did that for The Hill and started, I think, Buck Sexton on his show. And Buck's a good guy. But we got to start rallying together and working together better as conservatives to get the word out, and we need a conservative alternative. Well, actually, we need to break up Twitter, Google, yeah. Why there aren't antitrust violations there, or why they haven't been prosecuted as such, I don't know. I think the DOJ has brought a case against Google now, and if they haven't against Twitter, they certainly need to. And we need to revoke that section that gives them any kind of immunity, yeah, Section 230. Back in the back. Question about the Ken Paxton situation. I am actually completely ignorant on that subject. I cannot tell you a thing. Yes, down here. The question was, if I took the position as director of the FBI, what would be the first two things I would do? Yeah, drain the swamp, yep. I hate to punt on you, but that's a question I would rather not answer. Just trust me on that one. Yes. Yeah, we have no idea where the original 302 is. It's got to be in the FBI Sentinel system, or there has to be a trail of the destruction of the original 302 in the FBI Sentinel system, because those things don't disappear. And there's another draft, too, that we haven't gotten, because Strzok and Page refer to it in their text messages. It is possible that Director Wray might be sitting on it, or it's possible that John Durham is sitting on it, and somebody's going to be prosecuted with it. Mueller and Weissman. Yes. Yes. They could be prosecuted for obstruction of justice. They could be prosecuted for destroying evidence. They could be prosecuted for lying to FBI agents. There are a number of things that the special counsel operators could be prosecuted for if the facts bear out as they seem to be. Way back in the back. Red shirt. Yeah, they're probably still working on something else. And I don't think it happened at the Rose Garden, actually. I think it happened at the Cleveland Clinic debate. Yeah. So they're still working on all that, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't the Rose Garden. I think it was somewhere in the debate facility or prep or something like that. The voter rolls, Tom Fitton's been doing great work. I mean, I think Judicial Watch does extraordinary work. I don't know how, I mean, I haven't talked to him about how they follow up on that, but I can only imagine that they do. I can't imagine that they wouldn't stay on it, because they stay on things better than anybody except maybe me. Way back in the back. Oh, Lord. I am so mad at Governor Abbott. There is no way Texas should have been shut down. The very idea of Texas shutting down is offensive. I think masks should be worn by anyone who feels like they want or need to wear one. People who are sick need to stay home. We need to be trusted to have basic common sense. And we need to be able to breathe free. What the mandatory mask thing has done is enable the fascist left to go bonkers and to criticize our very existence and our breathing. I mean, I got thrown off a Southwest Airlines plane sitting at the gate at DCA, Washington Reagan Airport, for not putting my mask back on fast enough when I was sitting there drinking. Yeah, they'd been stalking me for about 8 weeks, and harassing me every flight out of there for at least 8 weeks. But yeah, the airlines have gone nuts over it. I mean, if I were ever going to wear a mask for my own benefit, it would probably be on an airline. But I generally don't feel the need to do that. I think they're dehumanizing if you're forced to wear one. Again, I don't object to anybody that wants to wear one. I think we're all responsible to take care of ourselves, and if somebody needs to do that, by all means do it. But this whole idea of mandatory is to me dehumanizing, and I refuse to view my fellow human beings as contaminated, even if they're sick. I hate to tell you, but I'm going to just take 2 more questions, and then I've got to go, because we still haven't finished that brief that's going to be filed by noon tomorrow. Over here. I would never have noticed that. But this is a peaceful protest. We love you. Nope. The whole thing about, and I don't mean to cast any aspersions about anyone who believes in the Q stuff. I'm not really familiar with all of it. I know I've seen some things that are right, and I've seen some things that are wrong. But I can tell you there was no grand plan for General Flynn to go through what he's gone through, not from the good guys. And the number of sealed indictments, I don't know what it's attributable to, but I can guarantee it's not draining the swamp. I mean, there are a lot of, they often seal indictments on drug dealers. I was a federal prosecutor for 10 years in 3 different districts across the country, and you seal indictments on people you think might flee the country, or you want them to not know you're coming for them, things like that. Like the Ghislaine Maxwell indictment was sealed for a while. They sealed the Enron, or the Arthur Anderson indictment for a week to make sure they worked behind the scenes to avoid upheaval in the markets because Arthur Anderson represented 2,500 publicly traded companies. So there are all kinds of different reasons that indictments are sealed. And I would love for that to be true, that it's to drain the swamp, but I really don't think so. One more at the back here. Yeah. Yes, nor did we stigmatize AIDS patients with masks or anybody else that I can think of offhand. This was special for this election year and this president, and yeah, that kind of thing. And the trillions of dollars of damage that it has done to our economy, particularly to small businesses, which really sends me over the edge. You know, the big corporations, many of which I love, but nevertheless, the big corporations are coming out fine. Amazon's only probably doubling its profit because of everybody having to order things online because you can't go to your local favorite store to buy anything. The impact has been horrific. I mean, suicides are up, child abuse is up. Every evil in our society that comes from being shut down or closed in or everything else has been multiplied 100-fold. And it breaks my heart to see all the businesses that have closed. None of that needed to happen. We could have been simply informed of the facts and the hazards and decided to accept the risk or not. I mean, that's what you do in a free society. And they've used it all. Anybody in power, particularly the governors of the 50 states, some worse than others, have just used it to benefit their friends in the pharmaceutical industry or their friends in the big corporations or whatever, and they've done it all at the expense of everyday, good, solid Americans. That's hideous. Yes, ma'am. I think we may be the only country on earth where it doesn't matter where you came from or what your individual beliefs are, but if you want to be an American, if you want to be everything that it means to be an American, if you want freedom, if you love justice and you love liberty, then this is where you need to be. And we welcome anyone who really wants to be an American. No. Don't know anything about the Epstein situation other than it being highly suspicious. At the very least, it would be what I call an assisted suicide. So thank you all for your time tonight.